Danny Long was only 8 years old, but he felt 80 tonight. During the years, the little town called Wormwood died its slow death. He had seen friends and classmates leave the place in droves, along with their mommies and daddies, of course. Now, Wormwood was officially dead. There was nothing left here anymore but a boarding house and one tired old gas station, and even they were about to go belly up. His mother and father owned and operated the Eureka Cafe on the edge of town, which was kept alive only by the handful of tourists who would bumble in sometimes, asking directions to Albuquerque or the like, and then wind up staying for food. Even the school had closed its doors, and Danny was tutored at home by Cordelia Jackson, the town's only whore. Life was odd in Wormwood, and it was about to get odder. He was sitting in the dark on the old wooden porch of the Eureka Cafe, killing time while his mom and dad cleaned up for the night. His dad, Homer, was currently putting all the chairs onto the red and white checker tables so his mom could mop the floor, complaining all the while. Her name was Wanda. So Danny had a crew of oddballs named Homer and Wanda for parents. Homer the clown, and Wanda the Wicked Witch of the West. Added also to the roster of names was a certain fellow named Roach, who did some cooking and some cleaning in exchange for free food and a couple of dollars a day. This dowdy existence and these dowdy people formed the sight and sound of Danny's life. Homer, Wanda, and Roach. And of course, Cordelia Jackson, the jaded former schoolteacher turned prostitute. Who wouldn't be sick of it? Dullsville all the way, even for an 8-year-old. And now, inside the cafe as it settled down for the night, his mom and dad began the usual late-night arguing. Danny considered covering his ears, but he knew the routine almost by heart. Come on, Homer, get a move on. The way you're moving, it'll be dawn before we're done. That would be Wanda. This would be Homer. You know, if you ever got off your fat ass and helped, we might get home a little faster. After a bit of this, Roach chimed in. Geez, put a lid on it, will ya? I got a date tonight. And on and on and on. Dullsville all the way. Nothing ever happened at the Eureka Cafe except lousy food and loud bickering. Nothing. Danny Long was almost dozing in the dark when crunching footsteps made themselves known on the potholed street. A shadow loomed in the moonlight, thick and distorted, bobbing to its owner's footfalls. The footsteps grew slower, quieter. Somebody was trying to be sneaky all of a sudden, Danny guessed, and doing a bad job at it. Directly in front of him sat 2 elderly cars, gleaming mellowly under the moonlight. The ailing family Bronco, and the truck that Roach liked to tool around in like some kind of big shot. Beyond them lay the rest of the town, where only a few houses cast any kind of light through their windows, and the rest were boarded up. The owner of the footsteps crept into view, a man with his shoulders hunched quite criminally and his head swiveling from side to side in the dark. As he moved, his face caught a wedge of moonlight and held it for a moment. Danny, crunching himself a little tighter as he sat in the safety of the dark, took mental notes. A stranger about as old as his father, kind of tall and kind of thin. Weeds and pieces of sagebrush stuck in his hair. His skin was shiny with sweat, and his eyes gleamed like big black olives. The stranger edged closer. Something flashed in his hand briefly, just long enough for Danny to see. A knife with a long chrome blade and big neat holes in the folding handles. Danny's friend Mark Olson had found one like that out on the highway a few years back, just before he moved away. But his dad made him throw it out. Besides, it was all bent and rusty, but not like this one, the one the stranger was advancing with. The man stopped at the passenger door of the Bronco, eyeballed things for a moment, and then went to work trying to jimmy the lock. Metal crunched and squealed in tiny spurts of sound. Though Danny's heart had slipped into a higher gear, he felt no fear at all. The Stark man attacking the door of the Bronco was interesting as hell, far more interesting than what Wormwood usually had to offer. Yet he felt compelled to speak. It was, after all, his dad's only set of wheels. "So, what you doing?" he offered into the silence. The stranger became a motionless block of darkness. A bit of moonbeam gleamed on the topmost part of his head, where a small twig of tumbleweed stuck up out of his hair like a blonde cowlick. "Are you trying to cut off my daddy's Bronco handle?" The shape attempted a reply. Maybe even steal it?" The shape stepped closer. Danny scooted backward, ready to holler if murder became part of these odd goings-on. I'm a lock checker," the stranger said. "Yours checks out fine. And say, how about you like a nice shiny quarter, young friend? I bet I've got one." "Try $1, Danny said. $1? Well, by golly, I just might have $1 here someplace." He was still coming closer. Danny scooted back until the heels of his scuffed-up cowboy boots caught on the edge of the porch. After that, he knew only a quick scramble backwards could save him. Rather than waiting for the knife to slash and hack and kill, which always happened in the movies. He rocked up onto his knees, ready to jump. "There, I found one. Look." Danny looked. The stranger's hand was extended out towards him in a shaft of moonlight, his fingers and thumb tweezing a $1 bill for him to take. On the man's palm, crooked and hard to see, but very strange anyway, was a birthmark or a tattoo of some kind. It appeared to be a circle of little stars. One of them, just beneath a crease in his skin, seemed to glow and pulsate. "Well," the stranger said, his voice grating, as if he were tired of this game already and anxious to get back to the business at hand. "Do you want the damn thing or not?" Danny opted for not. He jumped to his feet and scurried to the door of the cafe. "Dad!" he shouted through the screen door. "Hey, Dad! Someone's out here stealing your car!" Nothing happened for a long bit of time. Then, a lot of feet began beating their way from inside to outside, accompanied by shouts and squawks. Danny turned before the herd arrived to burst through the door. Caught in a slanting bar of moonlight, the stranger's eyes met his. "You just blew it, kid," he said, and then shuffled around and jogged tiredly away. As the screen door popped open to bang against the wall, Danny saw him round the corner of the street, and then he was gone. "Where?" Homer shouted. "Where's he at?" He paused in his agitation long enough to confront Danny. "If you're just crying wolf, get ready to cry for real," he panted. "No wolf, Dad," Danny shouted back. "He went that-a-ways." Homer, Wanda, and Roach looked. There was nothing to look at but gutted buildings that had once been shops and stores. Moonlight twinkled on broken glass in the gutters. A cloud slipped across the face of the moon, and everything momentarily went dark. Homer propped his fists on his hips and gave Danny a furious glare. "So help me, Danny. So help me, God." "He was sticking a knife in the door handle. A fold-up knife like Mark Olson had once. What are they called?" "Butterfly," Roach chimed in to say. "Give me a minute." He walked to the Bronco. Danny heard the tinkling of keys and coins. A cigarette lighter snapped to life in a quick yellow flame. Roach studied the handle and then straightened. "Your kid ain't lying," he called out and pocketed his lighter. "The lock's been pried apart, and there's some paint been chipped off." Homer's face twisted to an angry frown. "Steal my Bronco, huh? Chip my paint?" He turned and stomped back inside, muttering to himself. Wanda followed, trailed by Danny, who was feeling pretty important now. Homer stalked to the cash register and uncovered the telephone, which was stashed under a pile of used towels. He jerked the receiver to his ear and dialed 3 short numbers, and grounded his teeth together while inspecting the ceiling. Wanda drew Danny closer. "Did you get a good look at him? Do you remember anything about him?" she said in a whisper. "All of it. Every bit," Danny said. Homer jerked more erect. "Mavis, get Sheriff Tupper down to the Eureka right now. Somebody just vandalized my car, tried to steal it, messed it all up, and jimmied the lock, you name it." "What?" He frowned. His eyeballs rotated a few times, and his lips formed strange positions. "Damn. Okay, we'll sit tight until he shows up." He slammed the phone down. "Fat-ass bastard anyway. Public servant my foot." He picked up the towel and began twisting it in his hands. "Jackie Gleason was more of a public servant than Tupper will ever be, and they're both just as fat. Danny?" Danny perked up. "Go to the restrooms, hose them down with Lysol, and don't be peeking at the dirty Kotexes in the ladies' trash anymore." Danny groaned inside. "Dad, I don't wanna." "Do it! Now get!" Danny scuttered away, fuming. Here he was. He just saved the Bronco from being stolen, just risked getting stabbed doing it, and his reward was to clean up toilets. He wished at this moment that his dad would just plain drop dead. He would regret this thought for the rest of his life. It is the law of the West that every town must have a resident town drunk. The town drunk of Wormwood went by the name of Wallace Pickerford Grimley, a once genteel old fart who had lost a small fortune in silver mine investments in 1964, and rather than commit suicide, decided to stash his brain in a whiskey bottle until the time came to keel over dead from alcohol poisoning, which he expected to happen around 1965. To his surprise, and everyone's amazement, it was 1995, and he still hadn't died. Rumors about Uncle Willie, as he came to be known, used to fly thick and fast before the town died. He was actually dead, but too pickled to rot. He was once featured in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. He was from an alien planet where the drunks lived for thousands of years. He was really drinking root beer. He was a vampire. He was Elvis. In reality, he was just an atrocious drunk. Tonight, for no reason at all, he was preparing to bed down under the awning of the soon-to-be defunct Sinclair gas station, just down the street from the Eureka Cafe. For a pillow, he had a stuffed bear that some kid had tossed into the trash can. For a blanket, he had last Sunday's funny pages. For a midnight snack, he had a half-eaten Twinkie and a can of hairspray. The moon showed down, interrupted by occasional clouds that threatened a thunderstorm soon, as he set to work on the hairspray. It was a battered can of Aquanet that he had lucked into. Sitting on his funny pages to keep them from escaping into the rising wind, he turned the Aquanet upside down and mashed the button in. A squirt of hairspray hissed out, followed by nothing but the butane and propane propellant. When the gas was depleted, he set the can on the macadam, pulled the spray cap off, and pried out the plastic retainer with his pocket knife, which had half a blade left and had come from the bottom of a dumpster down on Wilder Street by the boarded-up True Value hardware store. Now came the fun part. He pocketed his knife and leaned back against the warm cinder blocks of the station, grinning. This was going to be a double whammy. The taste of the stuff was a mixture of burning plastic and secret chemicals so hideous they probably glowed in the dark. The first whammy was the taste. The second was the effect. The excitement in a venture like this was something only mountain climbers and skydivers might understand. There was no guarantee of surviving the ordeal. It was man against nature, man against fate. Uncle Willie had been at a hobo convention of sorts in the summer of 1987, where a man known as Fanbelt tried the stuff once too often. Fanbelt was widely known throughout the Southwest because of his ingenious panhandling device. Constantly carrying a broken fan belt in his hand, he would accost drivers at stoplights, begging for $1 or $2. "The wife and kids are roasting in the car," he would lament. "I gotta buy a new fan belt." Rumors about Fan Belt claimed he was worth almost $20,000 when he died, the day at that hobo convention. And man, did he ever die happy. Before drinking the stuff, he bade farewell to his friends, as tradition dictated, spread his belongings to be divided amongst them, took off his shoes in case he would kick or thrash and injure someone, and his shirt in case he would puke on it. Sitting Indian style under a burning New Mexico sun, his beloved rail cars casting broad shadows in the background, he purged and pried open his aquanet, offered a toast, took a breath, and tipped it to his lips. He drank it all in 6 gulps. His screams caused the other hobos to cover their ears. Water shot from his eyes and his skin grew ghostly pale. He tried to stand, tore out his hair, staggered around a bit with his knuckles dragging the ground like a gorilla, and he began to laugh. And laugh. Someone timed him on a stolen watch. He laughed for 6 minutes. Insane, wild, gleeful laughter that infected the whole convention. Soon, everyone was laughing. It reminded the former Wallace Pickford Grimley of the death scene of Mercutio, Romeo's friend, who was laughed at even as he died, mortally pierced through the heart. The time came that Fan Belt fell and laughed no more. Silence dropped upon the crowd. All strained forward, hushed and expectant. Fan Belt's pallid face was wet with tears of his former glee. A hobo pushed through the crowd and knelt at his side. He touched Fan Belt's neck. The hobo turned a twisted, horrified face to the crowd as he stood. He picked up the can of aquanet and held it high for all to see. His voice cracking, he pronounced the dreadful news. Fan Belt had perished, a martyr to his ideals. Uncle Willie had stood mute with respect while the others scrambled for his belongings. A single tear stained his cheek. This is how Uncle Willie remembered it. He also remembered dinner at the White House. Physically hale and hearty, his brain was nevertheless well down the road to ruin. He was bringing the can to his mouth when brief thunder rolled across the prairie. The wind picked up in a sudden gust. Trouble tonight, Willie thought, and a chill worked his way up his spine. God's mad about something. It was when the running black figure of a man burst out of the dark to the right that he dropped his can of aquanet. It was when the man pounded his way towards him on a direct collision course that Uncle Willie struggled to stand. It was when he heard the man's ragged, labored breathing that he turned and tried to run from the apparition, but it was too late. The two collided. Uncle Willie uttered a huge squawk as he was thrown against the gas station's wall. His can of hairspray rattled away until his funny papers ballooned upward and were snatched by the wind. The Twinkie in his pocket would never be the same. The other man spun twice, with his arms flapping, and careened into the station's single gas pump. The hose popped out of its cradle and thunked onto the pavement, releasing a short belch of gasoline. Uncle Willie groaned, slumped to the ground, and tried to rise again, and lost consciousness. The stranger did the same. Above, new thunder rippled through the black night sky as the moon was overtaken by clouds and extinguished completely.